Okay, so when you think of a millionaire, what instantly pops into your head? Is it, the flashy cars, designer stuff, those huge houses you see everywhere in movies, social media? It's kind of the default image, right? Well, today on the deep dive, our mission is really to challenge that whole picture. We're going to unpack a real classic in personal finance, The Millionaire Next Door, a wealth blueprint by Thomas Stanley and William Danko. And this isn't just some quick self-help guide. It came out back in 1996, but it's built on something solid, like 2 decades of actual research, interviews with real millionaires. So it gives this data-driven, honestly, kind of eye-opening look at how wealth is really built, often in ways you just wouldn't expect.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so powerful even today. The book's main idea, and it's really counterintuitive, is this. Most actual millionaires, they're pretty unassuming, they're frugal, they live below their means, invest carefully, and they build wealth quietly. It completely attacks that cultural story we have about wealth. It basically says, look, the things you think signal wealth, the fancy car, the huge house, might actually be signs you aren't truly wealthy. It just flips the whole script.
That idea of quiet wealth, it really does shift your perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So to help us get our heads around it, the authors came up with this really interesting distinction between a prodigious accumulator of wealth, a PAW, and an underaccumulator of wealth, or UAW.
Yeah.
How do they actually define those?
Right. They give you a formula. It's pretty straightforward, almost like a little diagnostic check. Your expected net worth, it's your age, times your pre-tax income. Then divide that whole thing by 10. Now, here's the kicker. If your actual net worth is double that number, you're a PAW, a prodigious accumulator. But if it's less than half that expected number, you fall into the UAW category, underaccumulator. And the formula, it's not just about the math. It's really a behavioral thing. It forces you to see that wealth isn't just about what you earn. It's really about what you keep. And honestly, that simple shift, that's often the hardest lesson for people.
Yeah, I can see that. It makes me think about the practical side then. If these millionaires aren't buying the flashiest stuff, what do their daily habits look like? The book really hammers home one core trait: frugality. So what does that mean in their actual lives? Is it like extreme couponing or something else?
Yeah, it's definitely not the extreme couponing stereotype. It's more sophisticated, maybe. More like intentional simplicity. The research has really concrete examples that break those stereotypes wide open. Most of the millionaires they studied, they live in pretty modest homes, not mansions. They often drive used cars. Good ones, sure, but used. They actively avoid paying premiums for brands, and they budget carefully, intentionally. Get this, a big chunk of them reported never spending more than like $399 on a suit.
Wow, really?
Yeah, or more than $30,000 on a car. Think about that. People you might picture in bespoke suits are buying off the rack, focusing on value. It's about function, durability, not just status. And that's a huge mental shift for a lot of us.
Okay, another really surprising bit was about something they call economic outpatient care, EOC. Sounds kind of helpful, maybe?
Right.
But the book argues it can actually be bad for building wealth. What exactly is EOC, and why do they think it's a problem?
So EOC, economic outpatient care. It's basically when parents give their adult kids significant ongoing financial help, like regular cash gifts, paying bills, that sort of thing. And look, it usually comes from a good place, right? Love, wanting to help. But Stanley and Danko argue it often backfires. It tends to discourage real financial independence. It can actually reduce the child's own ability, or maybe even desire, to build wealth long term. It kind of creates this dependency instead of fostering those frugal, disciplined habits we were just talking about. The ones needed to become a PAW.
Huh. That is really counterintuitive. And sticking with counterintuitive ideas, the book also pushes back against the idea that just having a wealthy profession means you'll automatically be wealthy. I mean, you'd think, right? Doctor, lawyer, you're set.
Yeah, that's a huge misconception, and the book really drills down on it. What their research showed again and again was that lots of high-income earners, doctors, lawyers, executives, often live these really lavish lifestyles. Their spending rises right along with their income. So they might earn a ton, but they actually save very little. Net worth might be surprisingly low.
Right. The UAWs we talked about.
Exactly. They might be high-income UAWs. But then, in contrast, the book finds lots of small business owners. People you might not immediately think of as millionaires, plumbers, contractors, welding shop owners, farmers. These folks often quietly build up significant wealth over time. It really drives home that it's less about the job title and way more about the habits. Saving, investing, living below your means, that applies no matter how much you make.
Okay, so if that's how they handle spending in careers, what does it tell us about how they use their most valuable resources? time, energy, money itself. It sounds like there's real purposefulness there.
Oh, absolutely. Intentionality is the word. What's really striking is the difference in how they allocate time and energy. Millionaires, the pause, they spend a significant amount of time actively planning their finances. They budget, they research investments, they treat their financial life almost like running a business. UAWs, on the other hand, under accumulators, they tend to spend much more time on consumption decisions. Shopping, thinking about cars, focusing on appearance. It's a fundamental difference in mindset. Are your resources things to be carefully grown or just spent?
And one last piece of the puzzle they highlight, which maybe doesn't get talked about enough, is the role of a spouse. How critical is that relationship in building wealth?
It's absolutely foundational, according to their research. Having a supportive spouse who is also frugal, or at least on the same page financially, was incredibly common among the millionaires they studied. They often shared the same financial goals, worked as a team, made decisions together for the long haul. It really underscores that building serious wealth often isn't just a solo effort. That partnership, that shared commitment, it's a huge factor.
Okay, so we've dug into these fascinating, sometimes surprising findings. Looking at the book overall, what would you say are its biggest strengths? Why has it remained such a touchstone?
Well, first off, I think its biggest strength is that it's based on actual data. 20 years of interviews and surveys. It's not just one person's opinion. It gives it real weight.
Credibility. Yeah.
Exactly. Second, it's just so counterintuitive. It directly challenges those flashy media portrayals of wealth, and that's powerful. It breaks stereotypes. Third, it's actionable. That wealth formula, the focus on specific habits like frugality, budgeting, modest living, these are things people can actually do. And yeah, some examples might feel a bit dated now.
Like the suit price, maybe.
Right, or car prices. But the core advice, saving consistently, living below your means, investing for the long term, that stuff is absolutely timeless. It's why it's still relevant. It's a behavioral blueprint.
Definitely feels foundational. But, no book is perfect. Every classic gets critiqued over time. I can imagine some listeners thinking, okay, but maybe it oversimplifies things.
Yeah.
Or doesn't account for everything. What are some of the main criticisms The Millionaire Next Door has faced? And, how valid are they?
That's a fair point. And yes, there are criticisms. One, as we touched on, is that some specific examples, car prices, maybe some investment options mentioned, are obviously dated now, given it was published in '96. But again, I'd argue the underlying principles hold up extremely well. A more significant critique is about the research pool itself. It did focus heavily on, white, male, American millionaires.
Right, limited diversity.
Yes, so it doesn't capture the wealth-building experiences of a broader range of people as well as it could. And some critics also point out that it focuses almost entirely on individual behavior discipline, frugality as the sole driver of wealth. It doesn't really delve into systemic factors like inequality, access to opportunity, or the role of inherited wealth or privilege, which are, important parts of the conversation too. So those are valid points to consider, but even with those limitations, the core behavioral lessons, the importance of discipline, living below your means, long-term planning, those remain incredibly valuable and largely universally applicable for anyone trying to improve their financial habits.
Okay, that makes sense. So acknowledging the strengths and those limitations, who really stands to benefit most from diving into this book, or even just from our discussion today? Who is this really for?
Oh, I think it's a real wake-up call for several groups. Definitely in professionals just starting out. It can help them build really solid money habits right from the beginning. Avoid common pitfalls. Also, high-income earners. People making good money but maybe finding it just disappears. This book is crucial for understanding and avoiding lifestyle inflation. The UAW trap.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs too. Seeing how many successful but maybe not flashy business owners built their wealth quietly, that's really insightful. And honestly, I think it's for anyone who feels like they're being misled by that Hollywood version of wealth, anyone who suspects that the rich lifestyle myth isn't the whole story. This gives them a dose of reality and a much clearer roadmap to actual sustainable financial independence.
Right. So summing it all up then, The Millionaire Next Door isn't really about finding the next hot stock or some get-rich-quick secret. It's a classic because it offers this timeless behavioral blueprint, doesn't it? It's all about discipline, consistent frugality, thinking long-term, and really relying on yourself, building that quiet, durable wealth, not just chasing a big paycheck.
Exactly. If you're serious, truly serious about building wealth, the kind that gives you security, freedom, options, not just having a high income, then the lessons from this book, from this deep dive, they're pretty essential. They challenge how we think, and they offer a path that's actually proven.
So Maybe something to think about as you go about your day. What's one small, maybe frugal choice you could make today? Something that aligns with those quiet, disciplined habits of the millionaires we've talked about. And just consider, how might that one small decision ripple outwards? How might it affect your financial future in ways you can't even really picture right now?